Yeah, so it has advantages, but what about the other side? I mean, the certain skepticism about the idea. I mean, one of the first questions I'm sure people are asking is, who does the troubleshooting when things begin to go south on this? Is that the in-house people? Is that the vendor? Is that I mean, uh, Peter, your sense that when things if things start to go wrong, who does the troubleshooting on this?
Yeah, as you add more complexity, right, the analytics abilities need to increase as well. There's a great quote about how it's much harder to debug something than to build it, so you better not use all your knowledge and skills building it, otherwise you'll never be able to debug it. So one of the core aspects of our product, we have network hypervisor running on server switches, and one of the biggest wows we get is from the analytics. You have to be able to look at all aspects of it, see what every port's doing, what every packet's doing, what every flow is doing. Otherwise, right, you might end up with in a world of hurt where you can't figure out the state of things and why they're doing what they're doing.
Rich, troubleshooting when things go wrong at 3 in the morning, who do you call for this?
Yeah, it's a great point, and clearly analytics sitting alongside of this converged stack become critical. I think to pick up on a point Stu had mentioned earlier around the operational aspect and capital being a 20 or 15 or 20% portion of that. Clearly, as large organizations look at moving into this platform, the teams have to align differently. It's not a world of you're the storage guy, I'm the network guy, he's the compute guy, he's the hypervisor guy. From an engineering perspective and the operational side, and I think we'll see an alignment of tools into that space, which either are led by the customers moving to that view or driven by that. So, clearly an external management stack, just like has been built in the vertical world, will be built in this world.
Stu, your sense of either troubleshooting or, I mean, do you think companies are having a lot of skepticism in terms of getting on board with this, or are they ready to start moving towards this?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a great point, James, is that, IT in general is, built on inertia. So making a change, especially something that's going to change what my people are doing, is tough to roll out. So if you talk about the role today, if things go wrong, I still need to have that expertise in-house, or I'm going to have my channel partner or my vendor working really close with me, because if it breaks, I need to be able to fix it. So often we talk about moving from less specialists and more IT generalists, but that doesn't mean that most of, especially larger companies, are still going to need some of those specialists. And a big question when we talk about cloud is, how much is IT, and what parts of IT are critical to my business versus how many of these can I just get rid of my own data center? So lots of companies are looking at, there's the public cloud, there's the service providers, and then there's what I do in-house. And it's not a, put all my apps in one place. Most of the companies we're talking to have a broad mix of software as a service, some things in public cloud, some things in service providers, and then some things that they want to keep really close to home.
Well, I mean, most companies are, or correct me if I'm wrong, they're thinking about deploying this in-house or not.
Well, so if you're talking the software-defined data center, that definitely is an in-house type of solution.
Right.
But even if you look at SimpliVity with the offering that they have, you might have one location in-house and then have your backup could be in a public cloud like Amazon running that same SimpliVity stack. So there's definitely that hybrid mix that we talk about is definitely something that we think is quite prevalent.
Yeah, it seems like all clouds will be hybrid clouds in the near term even. Mark, your sense of either troubleshooting or skepticism among companies. I mean, where are we in the adoption curve? I mean, and maybe the real question is there anyone who's actually really running a software-defined data center right now?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I've always had a little bit of problem with the term, and I understand it's a great term to rally around for sure. The problem I have with it is IT is very good at bringing things into, I'd say, a meeting setting and saying, what's our virtualization strategy? What's our cloud strategy? They make a lot of sense, and they have a good conversation and thus come away with action items of projects based on that. If I go in as an IT person and say, okay, guys, what's our software-defined strategy? not everybody at that table is going to understand what that is. I think we as industry analysts and industry vendors understand what the term means and understanding it's a good rallying point to talk around. But you need to be able to transition what that term is to really truly what it means from an IT perspective. And really what it comes down to is people are 50, 60, 70% virtualized. It's ultimately how are you taking that to the next step? What are you doing at that storage tier? What are you doing at that networking tier? And how are you looking at it from an application perspective? And how are you maintaining that fidelity across what you're doing on-premise with external cloud type of resources? So from that perspective, it looks good as a architecture, and it looks good on paper, and certainly we see some doing that. But today, people are very focused on what am I doing from a virtualization perspective, and how can I extend those benefits I've received over the last 3-5 years and bring them into the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah. Peter, what's your sense as you talk to companies about what Pluribus does? I mean, are companies ready to get on board with this, or is anyone? Maybe I talked to you about this. Maybe is there a true software-defined data center out there right now that you can point to?
Well, I think there are a few technologies that have to come along. This isn't just turn on programming on your existing devices and suddenly it all works well. Right. Things like VXLAN for segregating namespaces. We need better ways to name objects on the network, better ways to make them location independent. So you want to move a virtual machine from one data center to another. You don't want to re-IP address it. So, and all these technologies are in the pipeline, right? VXLAN and VTRE. And then devices that listen to these commands. So what's your source of the commands going to be? Are you going to use something like OpenStack or vSphere? And then you need the devices that'll listen to those. So all these things have to be cooked at once. We're in a lot of trials at a lot of places where they're experimenting with all of this, but certainly very early days. But a lot of places have a lot of pain. Right? You go to the big telcos, big data centers, big virtualization. They have a lot of pain in their current infrastructure. So they're the ones leading the charge into this. And then
what is that pain about? If you can identify what's bothering them the most.
So we talked to older cloud vendors who have had to cook solutions to this themselves with things like Q&Q, and then things end up being very frail, fragile, hard to change. You need a lot of experts to make it go. You have to write your own code to make it go. Now, we talked about the big three, maybe cooking their own solutions, writing their own software for the networks and all. But then most of the rest of the world doesn't want to do that. They want to go be able to buy components, use them, have skilled workers or semi-skilled workers be able to make them go. So it's all about making the technologies available, not for the rocket scientists, but for the normal types of companies, and that's where we see it'll end up. But at first, it's places with these big pains experimenting with it.
Rich, what kind of experiences are you having as you talk about what SimpliVity does, and are companies ready to move towards a software-defined data center, or is there still skepticism out there?
Yeah, I don't think anyone has a line item for their 2014 budget that says software-defined data center, $32. But I think there's this growing sense where, from the CIO, CTO level down, the current construct is not scalable going forward. I'm being tasked to drive out hundreds of thousands, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars across my estate. Whether it's operational or capital. I used to have a budget of X, and now it's X times 0.9, and next year it's going to be X times 0.8 and 0.7. So I need to think about driving something that gets me to that state. I forget who mentioned it earlier, but early in VMware's life cycle, it was you have 10 servers, you only need 2 servers. So there was this capital equation that kind of helped facilitate that. And to the next point, too, I think you made it. I would agree with we're not necessarily going to run less cables or do less things as we go to network and storage, but we'll gain much more efficiency. And I think that's the thing that CXO level is looking at, saying, how do I take the efficiency that I drove at the compute layer 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago and now extend it to the point of mobility, whether it's data within the current data center or sending my data somewhere else within the environment. To the point Pete's made a bunch of times, how do I now take that data that I moved from here to there and start that application back up? There's some additional process that has to happen, and current legacy configurations are difficult to do that. So I think that becomes the driver that enables the SDD, software-defined data center budget for next year. It's pulling out of existing buckets